So, hello everyone. My name is Erin Jones. I'm a translator and I independently research the military base issues in Okinawa. I'm a member of the Okinawa Interest Group, which is one of the organizers of this open press conference. Thank you all very much for taking some of your time today to join us. Welcome to Militarization, Destroying the Environment in Okinawa and the World. This open press conference was organized by the Okinawa Interest Group, World Beyond War, the Okinawa Environmental Justice Project, and the Police Philosophy Center. There were links to the sites of the other three organizers on the registration page and in the invitation email, and it is likely that our speakers will give a bit more information about these organizations. So before we get underway, I'll just give a brief explanation of the Okinawa Interest Group. The Okinawa Interest Group is a group that researches and spreads information, primarily about the US military presence in Okinawa. In January of this year, we circulated a petition asking for the construction of a military facility in Hinoka to be halted. Notable signatories on the petition include film director Oliver Stone, journalist and author Chris Hedges, former US State Department diplomat Anne Wright, and filmmaker and journalist Abby Martin. Abby, of course, will be speaking here shortly. The petition currently sits at just over 2,000 signatories. I will share a link to this petition in the chat at the end of the event in case anyone is interested in reading or signing. David Swanson with World Beyond War has been integral to organizing and hosting this open press conference, and I want to give special thanks to World Beyond War and particularly to David for taking his time and efforts in organizing and hosting this event. Before we move on to the main event, I would like to give David the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. World Beyond War is proud to be working with these wonderful people and organizations. We think that shutting down foreign military bases is a top priority in demilitarizing the world, and there is no place more appropriate than the incredible concentration of these things in Okinawa. World Beyond War is a nonprofit grassroots organization, educational and activist chapters by the dozens around the world. And we oppose not just a particular side of a particular war, but all sides of all wars and all preparations for wars and the environmental destruction that goes with it and the justification of secrecy and the risk of nuclear apocalypse and the blocking of cooperation that's needed around the world on non-optional crises and the incredible waste of resources that goes into war and preparations for war. So we think this is a critical piece of that agenda for us, and we're happy to be a part of it.
Thank you so much, David. Also, just recognizing today is the 13th of June. And there are a couple of matters I want to acknowledge about the date that relate to our topic today. First, June is the Battle of Okinawa Memorial Month in Okinawa. The Battle of Okinawa took place in the spring and summer of 1945 to the end of World War II. And June 1945 is the time during the battle when the most civilian casualties occurred. It also came to my attention that today is the 22nd anniversary of the Yeonju Highway incident in South Korea, in which a United States Army armored vehicle struck and killed two 14-year-old schoolgirls named Shim Mi-son and Shin Hyo-soon. And it is not our intention to schedule this press conference on the anniversary of a day when such a tragedy occurred. I wanted to respectfully acknowledge these events before we started the presentations. Now, moving on more about today's event, there will be two speakers, Abby Martin and Hideki Yoshikawa. Abby will speak first and then Hideki. As indicated by the title of the event, Militarization, Destroying the Environment in Okinawa and the World, the topic for today is the environmental impact of military bases, with a focus on the environmental effects of US military bases in Okinawa specifically. Without any further ado, our first speaker is Abby Martin. Abby is an investigative journalist, the creator and host of the documentary web series, The Empire Files, and director of Gaza Fights for Freedom, as well as the forthcoming documentary film, Earth's Greatest Enemy. Abby, I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for all of the groups for hosting this crucial event today. Okinawa was really my awakening into anti-imperialist activism. I was a freshman in college, and I remember it was the height of the lead up of propaganda for the Iraq War. And it was just such a confusing, tumultuous time while, this unrelenting patriotic fervor had kind of captured the entire country. And I was just going the opposite direction. How the hell did this happen? What did our government do to invite, something like this? And also just the media propaganda that was so incessant. And so I dove into literature, books like Chalmers Johnson's book, Blowback. And it was such a formative moment for me because the chapter on Okinawa was so mind-blowing. It made me realize the scope and scale of the US empire, the ability to seize and capture land and then just treat it like your playground. The amount of sexual abuse and violence against Native and Indigenous people in Okinawa, the impunity that comes and is shrouded the US military around the world, wherever it hosts bases. It was so startling and disgusting that it actually was the impetus to drive me to everything I'm doing today. And so it was just amazing to dive into this movie that we've been working on for the last 3 years, which we're almost done. But to know and understand that I need to go back. I need, not that I ever was there, but I need to go to Okinawa and really face what was the crux of my political radicalization. And so it was a beautiful thing to go 20 years after that awakening and be side by side with the activists who are putting their bodies, quite literally, in front of these machines to slow down the process. I've never been more inspired. I remember when I saw Okinawan people, moving very slowly, kind of just trying to slow down that process, which they successfully have by 50%. I just burst into tears the second that I saw them because I knew that they've been out there for 20 years straight. And that resilience is unprecedented. I've never seen anything that matches that sheer fortitude of the Okinawan people. So I think Okinawa is such an emblematic case study of just the environmental ruin and devastation that the military has brought upon the world, and also that heroic fight back movement of the people who have never stopped fighting. I think for this movie, we wanted to demonstrate that the statistic that we hear about the Pentagon's a larger emitter than 140 countries. What does that really mean, especially when countries actually sustain large population centers and host big agriculture and factories? And the Pentagon serves no point whatsoever other than projection of power. It's a completely useless entity. And so we wanted to prove the totality that goes far beyond just emissions, but really proves that a habitable planet is completely incompatible with an ever-growing military machine. And so we've been on the ground in several countries. I think Okinawa was particularly important because of what I said earlier about how emblematic it is, and in conjunction, the fight that's so necessary from the indigenous people to stop this madness. The Hanoko Bay, this Marine Corps base that they've been building for quite some time, it really is an exercise in pure destruction and absurdity. I mean, to raise this sacred mountain, to dump the dirt from the mountain into landfill, this beautiful ocean, where one of the last remaining blue coral reefs, the dugong mammal, I mean, all of these beautiful things are just completely threatened by something that might not even be possible to build. As I spoke to Governor Denny Tamaki, he just said this isn't even possible to sustain a base in this soft dirt. And so it really is, it's really jarring when you realize that the military industrial complex, it's such a machine on its own that it doesn't even matter. It's just about funneling money to keep this project going despite everything, right? Despite the cost to the environment and despite even the feasibility of such a project. So it's that absurd notion of how far are they willing to take this just to the nth degree. But Okinawa is just the tip of the iceberg here. There are two big lessons from Okinawa that I think we can glean from. It's the habitat destruction, how much they're willing to sacrifice just to grow, and also the toxic fallout. What cost that big military is having in terms of chemical leaching and waste that it dumps, the deadly footprint that will be left for generations. Of course, US bases are constantly being built everywhere. pristine habitats being blown up in training. And I think looking at, Okinawa and extrapolating that out to the 800 to 1,000 military bases around the world, and really realizing that every military base is a dumping ground. It uses the indigenous people as guinea pigs to test new weaponry. And the environmental regulations are so lax because, look at the Superfund sites here. These are toxic sites that are designated for immediate remediation and cleanup here. We have the EPA and environmental law here. What is the Pentagon doing around the world with complete impunity where they don't have to worry about pesky environmental laws? And I think that we see the effects of that perfectly in places like Okinawa. The PFAS chemicals is something that's really dire. But if you look at just the sheer amount of vehicles, the arsenal, the land armada that the US military hosts, that's where that statistic of 140 countries comes from. It's not even the toxic fallout and the habitat destruction and all these other things that we're talking about in terms of the Pentagon being the largest institutional polluter. They're just talking about the emissions that the Pentagon counts themselves, which is absolutely fascinating. When you really add in the nuclear fallout, the toxic fallout, all of these things, or just the sheer amount of chemicals that's needed to clean the machinery of the B-52 bombers, the tanks, all of these things, it becomes unquantifiable, actually, because we're talking about producing several tons of toxic waste every single day just to maintain the arsenal. So that's shocking in itself, right? But it gets so much bigger than that. Just nuclear proliferation and waste. The fact that the US military is now doing these next generation nuclear weapons after Obama approved this $1 trillion update to our nuclear arsenal. They're opening dozens of new plutonium pits around the Lawrence Livermore lab. Look, the risk of nuclear winter, I do not trust the United States to have its hands on nukes. Being the only country that's ever used them. And now we're facing an even more dire situation where we have a lunatic state, Israel, which is also nuclear armed. There's so many precipices of nuclear conflict around the world. It's just absolute madness and lunacy that we're still dealing with nuclear weapons at all. And then when you look at the toxic fallout from war, of course, and habitat destruction from that, I was always under the impression that depleted uranium was, it obviously is the most heinous thing to use because of its shelf life of over 1 billion years, and it never really goes away. But what I was most shocked to learn from the research of this documentary was just small armaments, bullets, render places completely uninhabitable. They make places dead zones environmentally for generations. So we're just talking about bullets, and there is nowhere where there's armed conflict that does not use that. And we're talking about training too. So obviously war is the most important thing to stop, build a community for global peace, but really it's about abolishing the profit-making arm of the military-industrial complex and scaling back this global reach of the United States empire and military. And this isn't some radical idea. There's people in Congress proposing drastic cuts to the budget because right now we're spending about $1 trillion in pure death and destruction. So, the pristine Ora Bay, I think, is a perfect case study of what's going on around the world. And the larger issue from all of this is the United States propping up fossil fuel dependent economy and infrastructure. That's why there's 800 to 1,000 bases around the world, to have these launch pads to keep the resource flow and capital flow going for US, the ruling class, essentially, in the West. And so, I think that where we're headed now is really fascinating because I've been inside the military. I went in the RIMPAC war game ships. I went into these defense contractor conferences and COP26. I was there confronting who should be the leading politicians on climate change, as well as the actual generals and these pampered military officers that are never addressed with any hard questions about this. And all of them, it didn't matter what side of the political spectrum these people lied on, all of them addressed a very dystopian setting of the world that we're entering into. And that is climate change is here, it's coming. And instead of mitigating one of the big sources of it, which is the US military and the Pentagon, we're going to use them to further militarize the solution. And so they're using the Pentagon and the military as the solution to the impending crisis. It's very alarming. And I was told straight up by one of these defense contractors who scoffed at my face when I brought up the idea of greening the military. Not that I think that's a solution, but I brought it up because that's what so-called progressive Democrats in Congress are saying. And he said, we're never going to stop using oil. It's a pipe dream. So bringing it back to the solution here, I think building up this internationalism, international solidarity, and awareness of how imperialism is driving all of these crises around the world, whether it's the migration crisis, whether it's the genocide in Gaza, all of these things. The bottom line is a massive military empire where Pentagon is supreme is completely incompatible with saving the planet and preventing the worst impacts of the climate catastrophe. And we have to get our heads together on that fact and insert this into the growing climate movement and the environmental movement. If we don't address militarism, our planet doesn't have a chance. And I'll pass it over to Hideki Yoshikawa and our gracious host, who I was also really honored to interview in Okinawa. He's an incredible speaker, and I'm honored to share the floor with him. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Abby. Sorry, I'm just going to go a quick introduction to Hideki before he starts. We turn now to our second speaker, Hideki Yoshikawa. Hideki is the director of the Okinawa Environmental Justice Project, which aims to protect the environment and communities of Okinawa from the overwhelming presence of US military bases on Okinawa's islands. He's a resident of the city of Nago on Okinawa Island, an anthropologist at Mayo University and the University of the Ryukyus, and the author of many major articles at the Asia Pacific Journal Japan Focus. Hideki, I'm handing it over to you.
Great. Thank you. I want to share my screen. Okay? Just a second. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Thank you, Erin, for your introduction. And thank you, Abby, for your presentations. It's really a big reminder that it's, the world we're facing today is so militarized and wars everywhere, and really have to be connected with each other. And your presentation makes me think that how this international network of peace movement is very important. And thank you, Okinawa Interest Group and World Beyond War and the Peace Philosophy Center for hosting this open press conference. And thank you all for participating in this conference. As Erin introduced, my name is Hideki Yoshikawa, and I'm the director of Okinawa Environmental Justice Project. With this project, we've been trying to bring international attentions to help stop the destruction of Okinawa's environments by the US military bases, and now the Japan's self-defense forces. Today, I want to draw your attention to this specific project, militarization project, that the Japanese and the US government have pursued for the last 27 years in Okinawa, despite our continuing oppositions. The Japanese government is constructing a military base at Henoko Bay for the US military in the northern part of Okinawa Island. There are two reasons why I want your attention to this project. First, this Henoko construction project demonstrates how Okinawa, an already heavily militarized place, has to face further militarization and further environmental destruction from it. The rich biodiversity of Henoko Bay is being destroyed, and we need to stop this destruction. Secondly, I believe this project is stoppable. It is stoppable because the people of Okinawa and our supporters are determined to oppose it. It is also stoppable because the environment of Henoko Bay presents a natural obstacle to the project in the forms of extremely soft seafloor at the construction site. Before I'll talk about the militarizations and Henoko project, I want you to show this map. And I want to discuss two aspects of Okinawa. Okay. The first is the geography of Okinawa. As you can see on this map, Okinawa is the southernmost prefecture of Japan. It consists of 160 islands with 48 of them inhabited by people. 1.4 million people live in this Okinawa. And Okinawa is very close to, as you can see, Taiwan and China. So this Okinawa's proximity to these areas is regarded as a geopolitical importance. And it has been used as reasons for the militarizations of Okinawa. Second aspect is the historical relationship between Okinawa and Japan. Today, Okinawa is a part of Japan, of course, and many Okinawans regarded Okinawa as such. But in the past, we had our own kingdom, the Ryukyu kingdom, with our Ryukyuan languages and culture distinctive from those of the Japanese. However, in the late 19th century, Okinawa was subjugated and incorporated into Imperial Japan. Since then, the assimilation of Okinawan people into Japan has been completed in many aspects of our lives. This complicated historical and political relationship with Japan has played a critical role in our daily life, and that's including militarizations. Now, let me talk about the militarization of Okinawa and the Henoko-based construction project. As you can see on this map, Okinawa is a heavily militarized place. There are 31 US bases and training areas that exclusively used by US military in Okinawa. And about 8% of Okinawa as a whole is occupied by the US military. And the Okinawa Island, that's where I live, the main island of Okinawa, 15% of the island is occupied by the US military. The presence of US military bases in Okinawa becomes more complicated and disturbing when we consider these numbers. Okinawa consists of less than 1% of Japan's landmass, but 70% of the US bases and the facilities in Japan are concentrated in Okinawa. I want to also add that further militarizations is taking place as the Japanese self-defense forces have been building and their own bases and deploying missile defense systems in the Yaeyama and the Miyako Islands. And of course, the pretexts of this militarization are the China threats, and possible Taiwan contingencies. It's a scary time that living in Okinawa, and just like in many other parts of the world. But how has Okinawa become so militarized by the US military? As Abby described and Erin mentions, towards the end of the World War II, Okinawa became a fierce site for the Japanese and the Imperial Force and the US military. In the Battle of Okinawa, the lives of 200,000 people perished and much of the environment destroyed. And after the war ended, the US military took over people's and the communities' lands and converted them into military bases and training areas. That set the footprint of military presence for the next 79 years until today. The US occupations of Okinawa from 1945 to 1972 solidified the militarization of Okinawa. During the Korean War and the Vietnam War, Okinawa became a launching point for the US military to engage in the wars in these areas. In 1972, the reversion of Okinawa to Japan took place. Okinawa was returned to Japan, And many Okinawans hoped that Okinawa would be free of US military bases and all the problems, crimes, injustice, and hardship associated with them. But as we all know, the reversion did not end the presence of US military bases in Okinawa. Instead, it formalized the presence of the US military bases. In this new context of Okinawa as a prefecture of Japan, the Japan-US Security Treaty and the State of Forces agreements between the two countries legitimize the militarization of Okinawa and allow its harmful impacts on the people and the environments, often with impunity. One example of these militarizations and harmful impacts is found at the US Marine bases, Marine Corps Phtenma Air Station. As you can see in this map, the Phtenma Air Station is located in the middle of Ginowan City. Their aircraft taking off and landing at the base causes thunderous noise day and night. The base has also been contaminated. The base has also contaminated the ground and water and the land with harmful chemicals such as PFAS. And the local people must live in the fear of falling objects from aircraft and, of course, possible aircraft crashes. In fact, in 2004, helicopter crashed in the Okinawa International University. Remedies for such harmful impacts and dangers are very limited and ineffective. Japanese court has ruled that noise pollution from the US aircraft has caused health damages to the people, but they have never ordered or asked US military to stop flying over these areas. The issues of land and water contamination with the PFAS have alarmed the local communities, but the Okinawa prefectural governments and the local communities, local municipalities cannot conduct their own on-site surveys for the contaminations at the Phtenma Air stations. So the issues of PFAS is actually up in the air, so to speak. Now let me talk about the Henoko base construction project. The Henoko, this new base, the Henoko base construction project is building the new base at the Henoko Ora Bay as the replacement facility for the dangerous Phtenma Air stations. The Japanese and the US governments realized that danger of Phtenma and decided to close the base. However, this replacement project was not any voluntarily or goodwill moved by the Japanese or US government. Instead, this project was a response of those two governments to the outrage of the Okinawan people over the rape of a 12-year-old girl by 3 US servicemen in 1995. In 1996, both governments set up the Special Action Committee on Okinawa, and it proposed plan to reduce the burden of military bases on Okinawa. And in 1997, the SACO decided to Phtenma would be closed, and then the replacement facility will be built in Nago. And after going through some changes of this construction plans in 2006, both governments agreed on the current Henoko plans. As you can see here in this map, construction of the base requires land reclamations of 152 hectares. It will have 2 runways in a V shape, and it will host more than 70 aircraft. And it will have a seaport functions, and it will be connected to Henoko ammunition depots. And Okinawan people, we cannot see this as a form of reducing the burdens of US military on Okinawa. this is simply a further militarization of our lands. But to carry out this plan, Japanese governments then had to conduct the environmental impact assessment. It was through Okinawa's Defense Bureau's environmental impact assessments that rich biodiversity of Henoko Bay was revealed and confirmed. Only an area of 30 square kilometers, Henoko Bay is a home to 5,300 species that include 262 endangered ones, like the dugongs and the blue corals. Compare these numbers with those of Hawaii's marine, one of the largest marine sanctuaries, national monument. This 582,578 square miles marine protected area is home to 7,000 marine species. In Henoko Bay, we got like 5,300 species in such a tiny area. In Hawaii, we have 7,000 marine species. So because of this rich biodiversity, environmental issues become key issues. And protection of the biodiversity environment become a rallying cry for the people of Okinawa and the environmentalists beyond Okinawa. However, Japanese government was also determined to pursue this project. And the Okinawa Defense Bureau's final environmental impact assessment, EIA, concluded that base construction and the base operation would have no environmental impacts. With this no environmental impacts conclusions, the Japanese government obtained the approval for land reclamation from then Okinawa Governor Hirokazu Nakayama in 2013. And of course, the next year we had the elections, governor's election. The Governor Nakayama lost in the elections, but the base construction was started with his approval. Construction started on the ground in July 2014, and the landfilling at the water at the sea began in December 2018. Then the new Governor Onaga, attempted to try to halt the project by taking the issues to the Japanese government and the court. His principal argument was this: democratic voice of Okinawa, the people of Okinawa, was against the base constructions, and the environmental concerns emerging from the ongoing constructions. There are serious problems. However, the Japanese government and the Japanese court always refer to the Okinawa Defense Bureau's no environmental impact conclusion. And that's from the EIA and from the subsequent monitoring reports. But in the late 2018, the issues of soft seafloor emerged. This was a critical moment. The Japanese government admitted that the seafloor at the construction site in Ora Bay is extremely soft, and the base construction now requires massive ground reinforcement work. And it also admitted that the two active faults were crossing at the construction site. So this soft seafloor requires massive ground reinforcement work. As you can see in this year, Okinawa Defense Bureau is planning to drill 71,000 sand piles into the seafloor to solidify the ground. And 16,000 of them will be 1.6 to 2 meters. That will be like a 5.3 or 6.7 feet in the diameters. And they'll be driven as deep as 90 meters or 300 feet below the water surface. And then Japanese government or Okinawa Defense Bureau insisted again that seafloor reinforcement work would have no environmental impacts. That's just crazy conclusions. but that's how they keep pushing this construction project. But to continue with the construction project and do massive ground reinforcement work, the Okinawa Defense Bureau must obtain the approval from the Governor Denny Tamaki, who was elected in 2018 on the platform of anti-base construction platform. So, and in last year, December 2023, the Governor Tamaki refused to approve the reinforcement work. So we thought the construction would stop. Then Japanese government used this execution by proxy. That means like Japanese government approved this reinforcement work or design changes on behalf of the governor or on behalf of peoples of Okinawa. That's very ridiculous. And then construction work now continues. But last 3 years or 4 years since this construction, that soft seafloor issues become very critical, I've been paying attention to the US side. How have the US government and the think tanks built this construction plan and soft seafloor issues? While the base construction is set to continue within the context of Japan and Okinawa, US governments have shown they have a different views on this construction project. The US Congress Research Service, the Government Accountability Office, and some think tanks have released reports. These reports really question this space construction project, especially the seafloor issues, soft seafloor issues. In 2019 April, Congressional Research Service in their pamphlet, it's called In Focus. It stated that additional challenge adding to delay in the relocation is the physical difficulty of construction offshore runways for the base. It was discovered that underwater soil is less stable than originally thought. And June 2019, again, CRS, Congressional Research Service report, they wrote, uncertainty remains about the costs and time frame of the project. And again, CRS wrote in October, additional challenge is the physical difficulty constructing the offshore runways for the base. And again, the same year, October, Center for Strategic and International Studies, they published a report, and the reports stated that project completion date was pushed to 2022, but the recent reports about soil instability and the potentially expensive fixes have cast doubts about the entire endeavors. And in 2020, June 2020, we saw this National Defense Authorization Bill proposed by the House Armed Service Subcommittee on the Readiness. And as you read this one, you can see this, how this US Congress Armed Service Committee was concerned with this seafloor issues. The Congress asked the DoD to produce reports that should detail the description of seafloor conditions, including the assessed end values below the proposed facility, and a proposal for addressing concern, including solidified seabeds plans for any additional environmental planning. And there are so many issues that we are very concerned were addressed in this bill. However, interestingly, and unfortunately, this bill never made it to the actual National Defense Authorizations Act. So it was very unfortunate. But again, 2020, the CSI's Mark Kanshian again released the report. It basically says it appears unlikely that this辺野古project will be ever. It appears unlikely that this will ever be completed. So having understood this, how the U.S. governments were perceiving this辺野古project, especially the issues of soft seafloor, NGOs, Okinawa Environmental Justice Project, and with other NGOs, we began to have meetings with the Ministry of the Defense, and we've been asking the Ministry of Defense whether the U.S. government agrees with the ministry's assessments of the feasibility of辺野古-based construction. And we asked them, do they really agree with their feasibility studies? And the Ministry of the Defense could not give answers to our questions. It just insists that they had provided information on the seafloor reinforcement works to the US government. And both governments were on the same page regarding the辺野古is the only solution agreement as a policy. So last year in September, Okinawa Environmental Justice Project with others filed the U.S. Freedom of Information Act request with the U.S. DOD to release its analysis and evaluation of soft seafloor and related issues. We asked the DOD to release what would be their expected completion time and the feasibility of辺野古plans in their analysis, and what would be the environmental impacts from seafloor reinforcement work in their analysis and evaluations, and the operability of the base. And of course, we have not really get any response from the DOD yet. But interestingly, in the last November 2023, the US military's top officials in Okinawa publicly expressed concerns and views on the辺野古construction project. It was in a workshop organized by the US military, and the local and the mainland Japanese reporter was invited to this workshop. And the local reporters, Okinawan reporters and Japanese reporters asked about this construction seafloor issues. So concern for military operation due to seafloor that was expressed. And this officer also expressed that the concern that runways are too short for the ones shorter than the ones at Futenma. Thus,辺野古base's operational function will be very limited. And the completion date, although Japanese government said like 2030 somewhere, but this officer said 2037 at the earliest, or even later. And the US military would like to continue to use the Futenma Air Station. So these comments are very important, and we want to explore these comments and see what we can take these issues to lobby with the U.S. government, U.S. Congress. So this is where we're at right now. The feasibility of辺野古based construction is in question because of this soft seafloor. But destruction of the rich biodiversity at辺野古Urabe continues. And the Futenma Air Station continues to pose dangers to people's lives and the environment around the area. And sadly, nobody in the Japanese government appears willing to review the Henoko-based project. And the US DoD has now released its analysis and evaluation of the soft seafloor and the seafloor reinforcement work. But I believe this gives us some directions, and with all the network, and we can have, especially with the US our organizations and the supporters in the US, we can push these issues to the US government and the DoD and the US Congress people. And we hoping that we can stop this construction. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hideki-san. That was full of really wonderful information, just very well presented. Thank you so much.